Hey, hello, friends. Lee Henson Hasty here with my new friend Saleem Grubril. I'm from Pittsburgh. Thanks for being here today, Saleem.
Thank you, Lee. It's a joy to be with you.
Thanks. We're just talking about, are we well? I said he looked well, and he asked if I was. We're vaccinated here. We're boosted, all our family, and so far so good. And let's hope the country numbers, all this continues to drop. And
Yes, sir.
but it's great to be able to gather in a virtual space with you today. And for others, for y'all to join us, we're glad to have you. Please let us know you're here in the comments. And we're going to be talking soon about some wonderful work with the Pittsburgh Promise, this topic of education as a key to economic mobility. It's an amazing mission of this organization and vision. Saleem is the founder of this organization, but I know he sees himself as a partner, not as the one doing this. So I hope you'll join us. And if you're interested in this kind of work and in nonprofit work and faith-based nonprofit work, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know you're here.
And Lee, just one minor correction. I'm not the founder. I'm the founding director, but I was part of the team.
Founding director. Thank you for that correction. But glad to have you here, Saleem. And again, I'm Lee Henson Hasty. I'm the Senior Director of Theological Education Funds Development for the Presbyterian Church USA Foundation. This is a ministry of the Committee on Theological Education. We work to support future ministers because we believe they really do make a difference. People like Saleem Grubril, who is a graduate of the University of Dubuque Theological Seminary in Iowa, and lives now and serves in Pittsburgh in a variety of ways. He believes that education is a key to economic mobility, and that's a theological vision too, I suspect. Right? Thanks for being here, Saleem.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lee. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this.
Yes. Well, it's, education. We always talk about Presbyterians like John Knox being ones who believed in public education. It's something Presbyterians believe in. And public education is where some of the spaces where you're working, I know. But thanks for your vision. I know you serve also Mosaic Community Church. That's Mosaic. Pittsburgh.org, a beautiful vision of a faith community there. So thanks for who you are, what you do, and how you're doing it. And I'm looking forward to introducing you to hopefully more to learn about this vision and what you're about. But before we get formally started into the topic, I just want to ask a question I ask almost all my guests, and that is about their call. In baptism, we believe we are called and continue to be called. Howard Thurman would say, what is making you come alive? Because what we need is people who are coming alive. And one of my friends also asked it a different way. Katie Geneva Cannon she said, what is the work your soul must have? So tell us, what is the work your soul must have, Saleem?
Wow, these are profound questions and great ways to frame them. So the reason my name is Saleem Grubril, I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, and raised in the Middle East, and lived in southern Lebanon for the first 16 years of my life. Arabic is my first language, English my second. Lived about 35 miles north of the border with Israel, and then during the early months of the Civil War in the mid-70s, 1970s, my family took some casualties, some cousins and some uncles. My brother was kidnapped, and home was bombed. And we fled. My father woke my brother. We got my brother back, thankfully. My father woke us up in the middle of the night. He said, "The car's packed. We're leaving." At that time, my father was working as an accountant for the American Embassy in Beirut, and out of respect for his 2 decades or so of service, they snuck us into the convoy they were using to evacuate American citizens.
Wow.
Way before we were American citizens, and got us out. But just months before the Civil War broke out in Lebanon, I remember uttering my first prayer. I'm sure I prayed before, but the one that I remember happened just months before the Civil War. And it was simply this: God, I want my life to count. I'd seen lots of my peers and my friends and some family members whose lives were cut short. and I wanted my life to count. It wasn't longevity that I prayed for, but fruitfulness that I prayed for. I'm not sure I understood that at the age of 14, but nonetheless, that was my prayer. We came to the U.S. I was 16 years old. I got thrown out of the first high school that I attended. I got thrown out of the first college that I attended. I find it funny that I'm running the Pittsburgh Promise, which is about sending kids to school, when I've been thrown out of more schools than we send kids to. But throughout that whole thing, throughout my dumb season of life where I was making stupid choices, there were caring adults in my life who gave me multiple second chances. So that first prayer, I want my life to count, having been the recipients of numerous second chances when I was in my younger years and in my older years, that kind of shaped my vocational choices. I've been serving kids since 1982 in full-time work serving young people. Early on in the context of churches, but then starting in 1986 through the context of urban nonprofit community development organizations. The Pittsburgh Project for 23 years, Mosaic Community Church for the last 21 years, and the Pittsburgh Promise for the last 14 years. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, maybe in a more long-winded way than you'd hoped.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, what a beautiful prayer. I bet you still pray that prayer.
I do. That is my consistent prayer.
Right. I mean, our life would count and matter, and it's not about longevity, but about fruitfulness. I mean, that is a faithful prayer. And it sounds like you're finding ways to do that not alone. With a faith community, with organizations, and also individuals looking for others looking for second chances. Maybe it's not the topic for today's talk, but sometime we got to hear about what got you thrown out of those schools.
that may be rated inappropriate for this.
Okay. Well, but I appreciate your vulnerability, because I mean, I just think, when you read in scripture too, not everybody is perfect, right? None of us, it's not about being perfect. It's not about being flawless or anything like that. But it's about, that kind of transformation toward making a difference. And it sounds like the story of your escape, so to speak, is almost could be a movie. Maybe you should make a movie.
I mean, the reality is that's the story of countless millions of people across the globe.
Gosh.
And we would never run out of scripts for movies like that.
No. I suspect, I hope, and I pray that there are many students that you partner with for college scholarships and support and outreach, are many immigrant families and first generation folk. Is that true?
There are 40 some languages spoken in our Pittsburgh public schools, and obviously every one of those students who speaks any one of those languages is one of our kids.
Right. So tell us about Pittsburgh Promise. What is that promise that you're making to the students, and to whom?
So in 2008, we launched the Pittsburgh Promise, and essentially it's simply this. We promised every kid who lives in the city of Pittsburgh and enrolls and graduates from any one of our urban public schools in Pittsburgh public schools, and the charters that are part of our system, that we will support them with a college scholarship to pursue their post-secondary dreams. And we give them $5,000 a year for 4 years of college, $20,000. And then we have a series of support services and systems in place that help them find other resources that ensure that they are grounded once they get on campus, that the goal is obviously not just to send them, but to see them through to completion, and then help them land jobs in the city of Pittsburgh if we can. And to date, we have supported 10,635 students with about $160 million in private scholarships, all private. There's not any government money in this. and 650 companies in Pittsburgh have employed Promise alums.
Wow.
We've been around for 14 years now, and our hope is to serve another 10,600. And then by then I will have little usefulness left.
I'm sure the mission will continue, and it's making me think. We were talking about vocation and call, and in the Presbyterian Church, we think about that from baptism. I mean, and we make promises that we will nurture and care for those children. It sounds like you were doing that. I realize these are not necessarily all Christian or even people of faith necessarily, but you certainly are treating them as children of God, and as part of your family, and that they matter and are loved by God and you and your organization.
They are children of God. They matter to God. They matter to us. And regardless of whether they know that or not, we view every single one of them as having nothing but an endless supply of sacred breaths that started with that very first breath that was blown into the nostrils of Adam.
Right. Wow, that's beautiful. And they see that. I mean, you know, it's not just something you're saying with your words, you're living it with your actions. And I love that this is not just, you know, sort of not just a launch into school and get started, but you stay with them, and you highlight, like, many of them come back, the 600 and some who come back and are employed back in Pittsburgh. I mean, that's full circle. I mean,
that was actually 650 companies.
650 companies. Oh, it's this. There's more students. 650 companies that have employed these.
Right.
Promise.
Right.
I see. Okay.
And Lee, you know, many of them have become. No, of course, I don't know all 10,635 of our Promise scholars. I don't know half of them. I know a few hundred of them, and then some quite well and quite personally. I've officiated the weddings of 4 of them.
Wow.
And look forward to baptizing their children if the opportunity comes up.
So what is the intersection with Mosaic, the Mosaic community, mosaicpittsburgh.org? What is the intersection with your ministry and organization with that community? Is this a hand in hand, or is this just, are you the thread that connects? Or
yeah, there's not an official formal connection between the two, but my faith community very much fuels the passion and the fire for this work. Many of the families in our faith community have children, and many of their children have received Promise scholarships. And but I mean, the church is a very small church. It's an urban church that has about maybe, when everybody shows up, about 100 people. Where I am the senior citizen, it's mostly young people. I had the privilege of shepherding that congregation until about a year ago, when our new young pastor took over about almost exactly a year ago, February 1st,
wow,
2021. And it's fun to be pastored by somebody who's younger than my kids.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm glad to hear you have children too. That's a good
and 5
thing.
grandchildren.
Oh, wow. So a lot of children of God in your life. That is for sure. So what is this vision, this mission that you believe? Let's just not assume. Why do you think education is a key to economic mobility? Why does this matter? And using this particular lever that you're using and Promise in the Pittsburgh schools, why do you think this matters?
I don't think it matters. I know that it matters.
You know it matters.
I have seen firsthand the transforming. I mean, we could probably all share anecdotes of people whose lives were transformed because somebody took a chance on them. I'm going to answer your question, if I may, in 2 or 3 short segments. One of them is, you know, I told you that I've had numerous second chances, and I've had lots of caring adult mentors in my life. Some of them you may know. Like Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, who's was a Presbyterian, ordained Presbyterian pastor, and then his pulpit was children's television, and he was a dear friend, and I had the privilege of giving the homily at his funeral. So he was an instrumental person. But another person who's been very instrumental in my life, who's still living, is a preacher from Jackson, Mississippi, by the name of John Perkins, Dr. John Perkins. And Dr. Perkins, who's now in his early 90s, had only a third grade formal education, but 11 or 12 honorary doctorates, and he's been an absolute champion of um, faith and community development, kind of converging into one stream, because it's hard to love God without loving your neighbor, and it's hard to love your neighbor if your neighbor is hungry and you're not. Like John says in one of his epistles, if you see your brother in need and you don't help them, how can you say that the love of God is in your heart? Which is a great question. Dr. Perkins, who carries on his body and on his skin the evidence of decades of ugly white supremacy and racial brutality and racism, has not allowed those scars to penetrate his heart. He's been the champion of racial healing in Jackson and in Mississippi, and really throughout the land. And we had him speak at one of our events, and he was talking to college students, and his opening line was just fantastic. And I'm not going to try to mimic him, but he said something like this. You've heard it said, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach him how to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. And the crowd was saying, yeah, that's what we got to do. We have to make sure that people can fish, not just give them fish. Of course, we got to give them fish if they're hungry, but you have to learn how to fish for themselves, and we got to help them.
Right.
And then Dr. Perkins had this kind of grin on his face and said, yeah, but who owns the pond?
Oh.
And that's a haunting question for me.
Right.
Ownership of any kind is something that some people seem to be able to attain over and over and over again, multiple times over, and then others never. Whether it's a leased car or a rented house or rent an apartment, or but never be able to get to the place of ownership. And in low-income communities and in the Black community, that's been a particularly hard thing to reach. And for most of us, how do we pass wealth from generation to generation? Most of us get to buy a house, and that becomes the kind of the center of whatever wealth that we have is the house that we own. And we pass that to our kids, and they probably will sell it, but then that kind of generates some wealth that they can pass on to their kids. But if you're never able to buy, then there's nothing to pass from generation to generation.
Right.
Table that thought for just a second. Now on to something else. On any given day in the Pittsburgh market, there are about 25,000 jobs that are available. And that's been the case for several years in a row right now. So we have jobs that we need to fill. We did an analysis of those jobs to see what it is that they require by way of education. And 60% of the jobs available did not require a 4-year degree or a specialized degree. 40% did, but all 100% of the jobs required some form of post-secondary credential. So if the jobs that are available require a credential, then we have a whole class of people who don't have access to a post-secondary education. So how will they have that credential to get that job that can then generate the ability to own something that you pass on from generation to generation? So, and the key that makes it possible for them to do that is access to education. Now, the gap, the chasm between the top economic quartile and the bottom economic quartile in the country in terms of access to higher education has more than doubled in size since you and I went to college. So both groups, the children of both the top economic quartile and the bottom economic quartile, their numbers of pursuing a post-secondary education has grown, but the top economic by vastly larger numbers than the bottom economic quartile. So we're hoping through the Pittsburgh Promise to make it possible for inner city kids who are going to our public schools in the city, whether they are Black or white or Nepali or Iraqi or Sudanese or whatever their demographic, and we have them all, that they are able to show up in the marketplace in a way that that enables them to compete. Because listen to this: today's economy is brutal. Today's economy is ruthless for those who are undereducated. There is not room at the table for those who are undereducated. And our message is not that you have to have a 4-year degree or more. Our message is a high school diploma is not enough. It used to be, but it no longer is enough. So we have to help you with getting a credential of some kind. And
well, I suspect these statistics are mirrored across the country. When people are talking about working on issues of race or issues of poverty, issues of inequality, this is something you can do. And this is a movement nationally. This is not just something in Pittsburgh, right? I mean,
there are about 40
You're
cities.
a real model, I know.
Yeah, there are about 40 cities today that have Promise-like programs. But the reality, Lee, is that on our best of days, promises like ours are just large Band-Aids. When our work is done, there will be 20-some thousand lucky kids who grew in Pittsburgh and had access to this. But that's not a small thing, and I don't in any way belittle the importance of that. But that's not systems change.
Right.
There are serious flaws with how we fund higher education in this country, and with who has access to it and who does not. You might be interested in this. So when I went to college in the late 70s, early 80s, and then I or anybody like me, a kid in that period of time, could get a full-time job for the summer, work 500 hours for the summer at minimum wage, and earn enough in those 500 hours at minimum wage to be able to buy tuition and fees at the average public university in the country for the following year, and then repeat the following summer. Today, to buy that very same product, the average public education at a state university, to be able to do that, we used to get it for 500 hours at minimum wage. Today, it requires 1,700 hours at minimum wage. Now, minimum wage has gone up, but the cost of higher education has gone
sky high.
Sky high. So, and 1,700 hours a year is 3/4 time, because a full-time job is 2,000 hours, 2,080 hours to be exact. So we've made it impossible for young people who don't have access to wealth, and by wealth here, I'm not talking about like great wealth. I'm just talking about the ability for somebody to help them pay for college.
Pay for college. Well, I don't know if you know this. My wife has written in this area, and there's work in the World Council of Churches around, and the PCUSA around wealth poverty and the ecology. They say there's also an ecological impact as well. So, gosh, you're exactly right. This is a systemic. There's systemic issues here, economic issues, racial issues to deal with. I love the analogy. I don't want to lose it. The question from John Perkins. The analogy is like, teach someone how to fish, but who owns the pond? And who gives the license for them to fish? And where do you get the fishing pole? And where do you get? It makes me think of the bait. I mean, there's a lot of it's just not that the fish are there and you can go grab them, or the jobs are there and you can go get them, or the education is there. There needs to be someone or some organization to be a partner in helping you, give you access. It's sort of that, provide that portal, that threshold. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. You're a partner to kind of, I want to say, like bridge into that access for. And I said it's not just for their individuals, it's for their entire families. I mean, I bet they're and you're just really getting started. The generations, hopefully, this will continue to thrive.
Gosh, I hope so. And if we had time, I could tell you a few anecdotes that, I mean, everybody has good stories, right? And good stories, enough of them make up data.
Right. We'd love to hear one story. I know our time is flying by, but if there are questions, we'd love to hear those, that folks who joined us. But let us know you're out there. But yeah, we love stories. Are great. There are a lot of preachers who listen to this. Preachers love stories.
And then somehow we all forget who told them, and we tell them as though they are our own.
Right.
Yeah. Would you? Okay, so
sure. Yeah, please.
I just remember very vividly one fall showing up at one of our high schools and doing a school assembly and giving a little pep rally, introducing the senior class in that particular high school about the opportunity that awaits them at the end of their year. I gave the talk, and afterwards, everybody went back to class. One kid stayed back, wanted to talk to me, and his question was simple. He said, "Listen, I heard your talk, and I heard you say that I had to have a 2.5 GPA to be able to get the scholarship. I'm starting my senior year with a 1.9 GPA. Do I have a shot at this?"
Woo.
And 3 years of high school, he accumulated 1.9, and he has a year left, and he has to get it at 2.5. I made up an answer. I didn't know what the answer was. I said, well, it's still mathematically possible. It won't be easy. It'll require 4 reporting periods back to back of nothing but A's. If you do that, the GPA will hit 2.5 and you'll get the scholarship. He said, okay, I know what I got to do. I didn't see him again until his commencement, his graduation from high school. I was the commencement speaker. We were backstage. He made a beeline to me. He put his hand on my chest, grabbed my shirt, and he said, "Listen, man, I did what you told me I had to do. Now, are you going to do what you told me you would do?" And then I invited him to come to my office the next day, which he did, and brought his report card. And lo and behold, this kid who over 3 years of high school had 1.9, the senior year, every class, every reporting period, straight A's, and the math did work.
Wow.
He at that time was living with his mother and 6 siblings in public housing in one of our public housing apartments in the city, and ended up getting into Penn State on probation, studied engineering, and now he's a baller. He's doing great right now, and he's supporting his taking care of his younger siblings. And
nice. Oh, wow.
He's married, has 3 kids, and it's just kind of fun to see that.
That is beautiful. What a beautiful story. That is great. I've never been to Penn State, but I hear so. That's probably just an experience in itself. Just being
great university.
College Station, is that the name of the
State College?
State College, yeah, Pennsylvania. That's beautiful. What a great story. Our time is going fast here. If you have questions or comments for Saleem, we'd love to hear those. You just type them in our chat, and we'll try to answer those. I'm wondering about how did the University of Dubuque Theological Seminary fit in all of this?
So when we immigrated and ended up in the U.S. when I was 16 years old, we settled in Iowa City, and then I went to the University of Iowa. That's the school that I went to, got thrown out of, and then came back to on probation and graduated from. Met my wife there. She and I married when we were 20 years old, 41 years ago, and.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then we came to Pittsburgh in '84 and started doing work here in the city. So when I went to Dubuque, I was actually living in Pittsburgh. So we moved the family to Dubuque, and I would spend 3 weeks in Dubuque, 1 week in Pittsburgh every month, then summers in Pittsburgh. So I was a commuter going to Dubuque from Pittsburgh, even though we have Pittsburgh Theological Seminary here. In retrospect, I could have made life easier on me and my family by staying locally. But I wanted to study with a now deceased theology professor who was at Dubuque at that time, and that's Dr. Donald Blesh.
Okay.
With Dr. Blesh, and had the privilege of learning from him, and the commute was worth it.
That's beautiful. I did a doctorate of ministry, the same way. I was following somebody I wanted to learn more about it, and it's great advice. Like, look and see what faculty. This is also for, I think, higher education too, what the faculty are working on and what they're writing about, and because that's what you get, that colleague, that those colleagues of faculty you get colleagues in terms of other students too, but that's a wise way, especially to choose a seminary and a graduate school. So I get that, even though it's I'm sure that's tough, but I'm glad to hear the mentorship with Fred Rogers as well. I have my little Fred Rogers. Everybody here on the show has seen my Fred Rogers.
That's great.
Saint Fred stays with me all the time.
What a special human being.
Yeah, and I'm now going to have to look up the YouTube. I hope there is one of your homily. I'd love to hear that. And you're doing. He was doing non-traditional ministry, ahead of his time, right? It's this kind of work, and I'm glad to hear Pittsburgh Presbyterian validates your ministry. They ordained you, and they validate it still, right?
That's right. They did. They ordained me to my neighborhood work.
Wow.
Most people are ordained to do parish work. Fred was ordained to do children's television,
right? And
I was ordained to do neighborhood work. So they call us specialized ministers.
Right. I'm the same now with in the work that I do.
Yeah.
But I can't believe our time has gone, and I would love for you to offer a blessing, a charge to us in a moment. I want to invite folks to join us in 2 weeks. March 2nd, I believe, is the date. I'll have with me Melanie Jones. Melanie is the new director of the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership at Union Presbyterian Seminary in Virginia, where they're doing amazing things there. Very womanist theology. I don't know if you've read much, Saleem, but very much a community engagement sort of world of thought. And Melanie is a young and emerging scholar in that area. And so I'm very excited to have her. Hope folks will join us on Womanist Leadership. And let me just say thanks again for who you are, Saleem, for what you do and have done, for your work with Mosaic Community, your work with the Pittsburgh Project and the Pittsburgh Promise, your work in the community of Pittsburgh with your family, your mentorship and connection with Fred Rogers, for all the things that make you who you are, for those connections with students like the story you told of someone, on the brink of going not making it into school and being able to set goals and give them something and them accomplishing that and you being there again for them. Thank you for that witness you're providing to Jesus Christ, to God, and to goodness in the world. It gives me a lot of hope today, and I'm sure many who are listening today and who will listen later. So thanks again. Would you bless us?
Sure. Well, in Pittsburgh, we are surrounded by rivers. We have the Allegheny, we have the Monongahela, and together they meet and form the Ohio. So I'm going to use, that's become kind of a visual for me for what Amos talks about in his book and his prophecy about let justice flow like the rivers and righteousness like ever-flowing streams. So whatever you are, may justice and righteousness flow from everything that you do and reach everyone that you care about.
Amen. Hallelujah. Amen. Thanks so much. And friends, we'll hope to see you soon. Take good care.